I'd guess that most people I've spoken with trying to break into the mobile home park space are capital allocator types. And that makes sense. The industry has been branded as a lucrative niche, so you'd expect folks who are excited by placing capital to be drawn in. But given the high percentage of financially minded entrants, and since cap rates have been compressed for a long time now, I think it's safe to say capital allocation skills will not set you apart and will not give you a significant competitive advantage. Let me put this more simply. If you are starting out and all the deals you are finding are overpriced, then you don't have anywhere to place your capital anyways. I realize what I just said will get a negative guttural reaction and strong disagreement out of the finance listeners. But that's what I'm after. One of my goals with this podcast is to shake up the way people think about mobile home parks. So I'm pushing you finance minds to think critically, to challenge your own assumptions, and refocus onto what other skills you have that can differentiate you and your business. Two skills paramount in this industry right now in the summer of 2018 include ability to lead generate to find good deals, and operational value extraction. In layman's terms, can you get them? Can you squeeze them for what they're worth? This episode will cover the latter. What better way than a view from the front lines? I'm going to recap my year and counting experience turning around La Costa Mobile Home Park while living on the property. Seriously, you won't know what your managers are shielding you from until you see from the front lines. Buckle up, y'all.
Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
A few days prior to closing on June 30th, 2017, Ian and I rolled into quaint little Lovejoy, Georgia in our respective old-school Hondas. We arrived with 2 blow-up mattresses, 2 cheap lawn chairs, a TV with no stand that we awkwardly leaned up against a wall, and just absolutely no idea what we were in for. We felt a range of emotions. Little did we know, everything we had learned was about to be tested and flipped upside down. People have asked me what it's like to go from 0 mobile home parks to 1, but truth be told, even though La Costa was our 3rd, it felt like we were going from 0 to 1, not 2 to 3. We were instantly drinking water from a fire hose, filling our knowledge gaps on the fly. Now, with over a year under my belt on an originally 527 lot mobile home park in South Atlanta, I'm going to tell you what we saw, what we learned, and explain why being on the front lines is worth your time. If you aren't visiting your properties, you are leaving money on the table and in unexpected ways. Let's begin. Part 1. Unconscious incompetence. The floodgates open. The morning of day 1 was cloudy, humid, but pleasant. You could tell it was going to be hot later in the day, but at the moment, the air was just quiet and peaceful. The feeling of serenity on the first walk from our double-wide to the office proved fleeting. However, as overwhelming anxiety derailed every distraction that perfect morning provided. It felt like the first day of school. And for good reason. Because as soon as I walked through the front door, I got hit from every angle. I had never had any direct reports before. Now I had 3 employees, all of which were staring at me, ready to follow orders like I had some master plan or knew what I was doing. I absolutely didn't. I had never been a property manager before. Now I had 245 tenants to track and collect from during rent week in the midst of an ownership transition. Overwhelming was an understatement. And then 8:30 a.m. struck, and we opened our doors for business. People were waiting and ready to pounce. Back due maintenance. I was astounded by how many people came out of the woodwork with issues. We had 76 park-owned home renters day one, and it felt like we met every single one of them day one. I also quickly realized that loudness of voice didn't equal severity of home repair, as some people would just scream about the minorest of issues. Meanwhile, others seemingly whispered about potentially dangerous conditions. Neither Ian nor I knew anything about repairs, so we had to lean heavily on our 2 maintenance employees who barely spoke any English. Imagine that. People screaming at you, forcing you to triage problems with no knowledge of how to assess the damage or fix anything, and limited ability to speak Spanish. Oh, and no way to audit the work so you can even measure the effectiveness of your employees. It was a bloodbath. We made so many mistakes. Luckily, no one was hurt, and eventually we did get everything resolved. Back due maintenance alone exposed so many knowledge gaps in our respective repertoires. The late payers. Con artists exist, and they're good at it. In retrospect, we met about every single slick talker on day one. Now, let me explain why you probably aren't prepared for this onslaught. Psychology has been my obsession since the fall of 1999. So much so that I selected it as my major undergrad, and I even wrote a book about how to use it to negotiate. In sales, I was lied to from all angles, every day, for years. As a commission-only salesperson, my livelihood depended on my lie detection abilities and skill circumventing this treacherous landscape. I was confident I was well prepared to face the con artists of the mobile home park. I wasn't. You see, in car sales, you interact with customers who buy a car maybe once every few years. And in psychology, lie detection only goes as far as to be able to occasionally detect discrepancies between words and body language, which is very difficult to do in general. But even if discrepancies are detected, they are red flags at best. At best. In property management, you are interacting with people who have made a living for years out of honing their sales pitch as to why they can live on your property and not pay, or not pay in full, or pay when they want. So if you think you're just going to roll into property ownership and be able to spot a liar with no experience, you're wrong. And don't expect your part-time manager to have those abilities either. Everyone just has to fail their way into competence. And worse, the people who tried to get away with stuff with the last ownership that didn't put up with it, they'll test you on it. But the difference is, now they have fresh meat. And with the feedback they got from the last ownership, they'll have a well-practiced pitch for their shenanigans. More on how to handle these people and avoid those mistakes shortly. The rumor mill. I discussed this on a prior episode, see what will break. So we won't go into too much detail here, but I will say this. You'll be like the mayor of a small town. People are indefensibly fickle. They'll think you have a magic wand that you can just wave and an unlimited bank account. They'll praise you to your face and curse you behind your back. Every action or inaction on your part will enrage some and underwhelmingly pacify others. Rarely do you get compliments for doing a good job, unless someone is buttering you up for a big ask. It is a very thankless job. You'll have limited time and limited money to address a lot of issues. Triage is vital, but you, the owner, on site, are the top dog and report to no one else. You have power. Possibly unlike you've ever experienced. Now, your park managers shield you from lots of this unimportant drama, but more importantly, you're giving your managers more power than you might realize. How can you trust but verify that they aren't abusing that power? Marketing on Craigslist. We began with about 30 vacant park-owned homes we planned on rehabbing and flipping, but tried posting Craigslist ads for both the completed rehabs and the quote-unquote handyman specials. Shooting from the hip, in my experience, 9 out of 10 of those Craigslist leads will waste your time to varying degrees. Some are quick dismissals. Some will take days to go away. Everything in between. Yes, that 1 out of 10 makes everything worth it, but I wish I had known that up front because we got bombarded by tons of weak leads out of the gate, which demanded way too much of our time, and almost all of them proved completely fruitless. Handyman specials have been hit or miss. When you essentially say free house, that draws an element you don't want. We tried pressing people for repair knowledge, only to be met with, oh, well, my brother's going to do everything. We then tried requiring copies of contractor licenses and proof of funds, but all that did was making saying no to some of these knuckleheads more difficult because they always assume that you are rejecting them as a person and you are rejecting their life's work. So, yeah, that's not very pleasant. We have successfully sold handyman specials. However, it is almost always from word of mouth rather than Craigslist. Remember how I said connectors are like gold? This is another huge reason why. The silver lining for our day one was that eventually we got to lock the doors and close the office, and then try to figure out what the heck just happened. Then we discovered the accounting was wrong, and I didn't know how to use Rent Manager. We spent hours trying to fix accounting breaks. We ended up sending late notices to people who had paid in full on time. We got yelled at a lot for these errors. Our first day started about 8 a.m. and didn't finish till about 11 p.m. And for the next 3 months, every single day followed suit. Part 2. Conscious incompetence. The most important lesson from the first 90 days was prioritization and triage. By day 90, things were not less hectic. We were just better at handling the chaos. Also at day 90, you face the consequences of your early mistakes. While the first few days were unconscious incompetence, around day 90, if not sooner, you enter conscious incompetence. In short, you suck, but now you know it. Here's how we organized. Google Sheets. We created what we called La Costa Universe, which is a Google Sheets file with tabs that include available homes with specs and title information, contacts, which includes connectors, contractors, local government, and lots of other key people's contact information in one place, prospects for potential new residents, conversions tracking for current park-owned home renters complete with their rent, market rent, security deposits, time until their lease expires, and notes regarding the sales conversations we had with them to gauge their interest in converting from a renter to a homeowner, which, by the way, 1 year later, and lots of sales effort on our part, we have only successfully converted about 40% of the original residents that were renters. Renters typically want to stay renters. And of course, a summary tab with KPIs, key performance indicators. We now employ a universe Google Sheet for each one of our properties and have begun to include things like due diligence, rent roll, and many other useful bits of information in one place, accessible wherever you have internet. Y'all, I couldn't recommend this enough. Fixing things. This is going to be absolutely embarrassing for me. I really knew absolutely nothing about how to fix things, and I paid for it dearly. Regardless if you run a park-owned home model or a tenant-owned home model, if you have park-owned homes on your property, they're going to break, and you're going to need a competent team to address these subsequent issues. We did not have that going into La Costa, and worse, the first few hires we made actually added to the list of service orders rather than lessen the volume. Oh, we got burned. Contractors can sound like they know what they're doing and either not know what they're doing, or worse, just take advantage of you because they can. Humility is just so important. I'll admit it, we were taken for thousands of dollars. We hired people we found out later didn't even have a business license. We hired people who weren't insured. We hired people who had warrants out for their arrest. We paid cash for materials that were carted off, never to be seen again. You just got to let your ego just take a beating. Otherwise, your mind's going to create delusions to protect your ego, those delusions being destructive and inhibitive in your ability to learn from your mistakes. I'll tell you, the only way we got through this was through trial and error. There was just no getting around this. I had no construction experience. I never had any experience doing anything with my hands, building things, and I paid for it. And that's really important beyond just fixing things, because if you don't have any knowledge or any know-how in any facet of entrepreneurship, you're going to pay. And not necessarily just with your money. It might be your ego. It might be your well-being because you're stressed out. It could be a lot of things that you are going to pay for. And you shouldn't just roll into something like this like I did, thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to figure that out later. It's not going to be a big deal. No, it was a huge deal. It was a huge, huge deal. But the good news is, I will say that with the right attitude and with the ability to just get kicked and just get right back up, eventually we were able to build a team of solid, trustworthy, knowledgeable people who, I will say now, completely spoil us. Completely. But that took a lot of time. And that took a lot of work. And really, most importantly, that took feeling like an idiot, showing people that you were an idiot, but being a good sport about it and learning from your mistakes and then not making them again. Conscious incompetence. The first few months living in that double wide, sleeping on that air mattress, La Costa Mobile Home Park, was a lollapalooza of so many emotions and failures. I constantly felt we were incompetent. I was scared, humbled, overwhelmed. I missed my wife. Sometimes I would question myself. Why would I leave a stable corporate job for a completely uncertain entrepreneurial future? But what stuck out the most was shock. It was shocking discovering what mobile home park ownership was really like. It was shocking that we had to work 12-hour days just to get everything organized. It was shocking realizing how little we really understood about the industry, despite having consumed so much content and even owning 2 properties. The realization that I came to is that when you listen to a podcast, and I'll throw myself under the bus, even like mine, really what you get is a dopamine rush. You feel like you have an edge. You feel like you're being smart. You feel like this podcast or blog or whatever is giving you some insider information, some edge that the market doesn't have. And you'll be able to apply that secret knowledge and profit. Now, it's one thing to absorb content, feel a rush, and then not do anything. At that point, you've been entertained and nothing more. But you are probably like I was. I wanted to start a business. I was ready to take action. I consumed content as if it was Bible. And it wasn't. And to be fair, it couldn't have been. Because ultimately, all content can do for you, even my own content, is give you perspective. The bulk of your learning is going to come from the action you take and the trial and error process you inevitably go through. So don't let me just be your entertainer. Here's a great example of why perspective matters. This episode so far has painted a largely negative picture of my first 90 days. Think about it. I've used words like anxiety, overwhelmed, shocked, incompetent, and a slew of other words that generally conjure up negative emotions. There's one key detail I've been leaving out, on purpose. Why would I keep going if this experience, on the whole, made me feel bad? You see, the one overarching emotion that I felt during those first 90 days was excitement. The chaos and pressure that I felt was absolutely exhilarating, especially because my skill set matches this industry. My brain was wired to just pump dopamine out in situations like I faced. It was really fun for me. And no one had to tell me to dump 12 hours in each day. I did it because I wanted to. I had found what I was meant to be doing. It's important to note that I didn't know that up front and was pleasantly surprised later on. And there are two reasons why I say that. First, when I started this segment, I only focused on the negative aspects, by design. So I could drive home a point that my feeling of excitement dominated all the other negative emotions I was experiencing. Had I just ended the story before this plot twist, I would have painted a completely different picture. It's not difficult for someone with a platform like me and this podcast to craft a story like I just told you and leave out one small detail that ultimately changes the entire message. Perspective matters. Get as much of it as you can and beware of making massive conclusions based on limited perspective. Second, if I consumed nearly all available content at the time and missed something as obvious like, you're going to be really passionate about this, what does that tell you? What that tells you is that there isn't enough perspective being injected into the market. Possibly even more important than that, what this tells you is that if you are someone like me that takes action, you run the risk of being unpleasantly surprised. Take a moment to think about that. How different would this story have been if my excitement wasn't there to get me through all those negative experiences? I would have been miserable. And this would have been a horror story. If you are a person of action, it is easy to charge forward without first thinking. This is why I'm here. I hope to help you find what mobile home park ownership truly is about. Because if you just read the blogs and you just listen to podcasts and you hype yourself up, you may make an incredibly costly mistake that you cannot undo. But you also may find through my podcast that you're like me. And you are so much happier having quit your job and chased your dream. When I started, I didn't have a clue. But maybe through me, you will. I'm splitting this segment in two. It's not just that I want short episodes. It's also that I think there are really two big takeaways from this now 2-part episode, and I'll leave one for each part. With the help of my mini plot twist and dive into the emotions that I felt, I hope you'll walk away from this episode understanding the importance of perspective. A lot of people ask me what I wish I had known when I was first starting out. I really think this episode is my answer, and that I've been narrating this episode to my former self. But I've covered perspective before, just not with this mega focus into details on mobile home park ownership. The next episode, the takeaway is completely new. And I think everyone needs to hear what I'm going to say. Had I known it when I was first starting out, it would have been a game changer. Would having my due diligence list help you? If so, I will let you have it for free. That's right. My list that took me 3 years to develop and includes plenty of fixes for mistakes that I made that now you can avoid. All absolutely free. All I ask for in exchange is leave me a 5-star review and a comment. Screenshot your comment after it goes live and email it to me at my website, archimedesgrp.com. Afterwards, let's connect. This episode was inspired by a listener just like you. Even if you don't have any ideas for future episodes, let's still connect, as I'm sure there are ways you and I can help each other out. I'm looking forward to chatting soon.